issues associated with the use of chemical weapons. Uh, why is it that there's such a concern now and not for the past year and a half in which the death toll has gone to six figures? So if you could address that, I think that gets right to the heart of the matter.
Absolutely, Drew, and thank you for what you do in terms of your work with teachers and efforts to help make this kind of event happen. And Joe, let me just answer you directly and your students. We are deeply concerned about the overall loss of life in Syria. It's now over 100,000, somewhere around 100,000 people. And we have consistently spoken out against Assad's slaughter of his own people using Scud missiles, using airplanes against civilians, dropping napalm on children in schools. I mean, these are war crimes almost by any standard, but there hasn't been a will in the global community, let alone in our own country, to get involved in Syria's civil war. And that's the way people see it, that it's that kind of internal struggle. He has used small amounts of chemical weapons, but our intelligence community was only able to make a judgment, that he had in fact done it. With a level of confidence that I might choose to believe it, the president might choose to believe it, but we wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable taking that publicly and arguing for the whole world that we ought to have a military strike about it. The president did, after that line was crossed, decide he was going to provide assistance to the opposition, the military opposition in Syria. And without putting American boots in the ground, without becoming directly involved, he decided we would support the opposition as a consequence of the earlier use of the levels of chemicals that we determined had been used. Now, on August 21st, all of those prior levels and prior incidents were eclipsed with this one incident in which about 1,400 plus people died that we know of, that we were able to actually account for, more than that for certain, 400 plus children. And they died because of an attack that we had much more evidence in order to be able to prove it to the world. That's when the president decided that that was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, with respect to his usage. And the president decided that it needed a response from the world because chemical weapons were suddenly being used as a tactical weapon in a civil war, and any use of chemical weapons is unacceptable. That's why we're here where we are today. There's a moral imperative to this. There's a strategic imperative to this. There's a practical military imperative in terms of sending him a message that his infrastructure militarily and his capacity to wage war could be affected if he continues to use these prohibited, outlawed, and outrageous weapons.
Secretary, it's under the topic of partners here, and specifically the United Nations. And this question comes from my colleague Kathleen Cadigan, an AP U.S. History and Holocaust Studies teacher at Thomas Jefferson High School outside of Dallas. And specifically, she's questioning the use of the purpose, of UN peacekeeping forces, and her students are incredulous and want to know where the UN is at. And if you could please just elaborate, why, in your opinion, is the UN so visibly absent on this issue?
Well, the UN is absent on this issue, regrettably, and I underline regrettably, because the Russians and the Chinese have blocked us, I think now 11 or 12 times, from being able to try to create humanitarian access routes, guarantee direct access for humanitarian assistance. They have blocked us from condemning even the generic use of chemical weapons, let alone pointing the finger of blame at somebody, just the generic use. So we've been blocked by particularly the Russians, who up until now have been the principal supporters of the Assad regime, together with Hezbollah and Iran. And I think every listener, as you think about why this is important, you really need to ask yourselves, what does it mean to you that the principal supporters of Assad are Hezbollah, which is a terrorist organization, and a client of Iran, with whom we are in a big struggle to prevent them from getting weapons of mass destruction, specifically nuclear weapons.
Joining us, and to everyone on Google+, thank you for watching.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.